Welcome to the 8th module of the ICWA Education Series presented by the Nebraska Court Improvement Project in collaboration with the Indian Child Welfare Coalition. Today we will learn more about the ways in which the ICWA upholds family integrity and stability by keeping Indian children connected to their community and culture. Specifically, we will discuss cultural identity, the ways in which culture is a protective factor, the creation of cultural plans, and finally, we will wrap things up with a few learning check questions. First, we should fully understand what cultural identity is and why it is important. Cultural identity is important for all youth and is a very important piece of who we are. Often, youth who have been in foster care or who have been adopted struggle with identity and cultural identity specifically. Our identity is formed by our families, our communities, and the environment in which we live in. Often youth who have experienced foster care develop unhealthy identities and cultural identities or develop identity confusion. They may also develop a hatred or confusion towards their culture.
Remember me, when the sun comes up in the morning sky, there I will be, soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me, down the road, hand in hand, you and me, hey oh.
You know, the needs, the cultural needs of a 3-year-old is going to be way different than the cultural needs of a 15 or 16-year-old that's trying to find their identity and the importance of a cultural identity. So helping them make those connections to help build that cultural identity. Because a lot of times that's what we see with kids in foster care is that they don't have those resources, they don't have those connections, and they really struggle with developing that cultural identity.
Today, Indigenous people are trying to repair damage done as a result of forced assimilation policies, including the boarding school era and the Indian Adoption Project.
What matters in life is not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it.
My dad said when they were growing up, they said, we used to play cowboys and Indians. And he started telling me this story. And we used to fight over, nobody wanted to be the Indian. And he said, I didn't think about that. We'd all play, and I'd always suck it up, and I'd be the Indian. But how ironic is it for a bunch of Indian children to be playing cowboys and Indians, and nobody wants to be the Indian? The introduction of a destruction of culture and loss of what is good. And I asked my dad, well, why didn't anybody want to be the Indian? And I thought I knew the answer. He said, because everybody knows the Indian dies. And that already in his generation, as strong as he was, he received a message as a young child. I received the same message, that it was not good to be Indian.
Today, through various systems, including the child welfare system, we are treating the symptoms of historical trauma. Through tools such as a cultural plan, we can ensure that we are all working together to help ensure youth have the tools and support to develop a healthy cultural identity. By using a protective factors approach, child welfare professionals can help families emphasize their strengths and build or maintain cultural connections.
Culture is definitely a protective factor. It, can help us. There's so many things within our culture that are helpful. They're healing, that can help our families in ways that that other services aren't able to help provide. We a lot of times, a lot of tribes have ceremonies and ways of living that can help a family heal from, maybe traumatic events. Ceremonies that would help help the children grow, help them learn. I guess I can't stress enough how important that cultural identity is.
In Module 7, we learned about the role of extended family as it relates to placement preferences and best interests. Extended family can also be understood in the context of a protective factor. Cultural support systems give children access to caring adults and allow parents to rely on an extended family for support.
If you could have, if every parent's attorney and guardian ad litem, well, and everybody, by the way, but, any parent's attorney had a really solid understanding of the history of the culture, what's appropriate. Some things I've learned too, I'm not an expert by any stretch, but sometimes I've learned, it is really normal that a grandparent might raise a child for a period of time in a Native American family. And that's not weird. That's part of the culture. It took me years to kind of understand that shouldn't be seen as a negative. That should be seen as I'm thinking, well, if I was struggling, wouldn't I call my mom too? It's really easy to be very judgmental. And even if you don't want to be. And so, but some of those things I think would be good for everybody working with families to understand this should be seen as, culturally appropriate or a positive that a family has extended support or whatever the case may be. So those types of things. So the education piece, beforehand, I think would be really positive. How do you know? It's not like we're learning this in school necessarily. And if you're going above and beyond, which maybe we all should be, to read up and learn, then you might know those things. But even if you read it, it might not resonate, at the time. So sometimes it's good to see it, really how it plays out in real life when you're working with a family. But yeah, I think some of those things just get easily missed. Because you also think, and this woman I'm talking about, this mom, she's had multiple children. Some are living with the grandpa, some are living with the dad, some are living with the grandma. But she made the choice to put them somewhere where they're going to be safe. So instead of focusing on, well, how many children do you not have living with you? Maybe we should be thinking about, you've made good decisions in the past about making sure your children can be safe. So we know you can do that. So how do we figure out how to work with you now with the child or children you are struggling with. And so, yeah, I think that would be good to shift focus.
When we think about culture as a protective factor, it is helpful to reflect on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The fourth need, self-esteem, is heavily informed by self and cultural identity. A sense of cultural identity and a connection to cultural traditions can significantly contribute to self-esteem and self-worth.
So that culture piece, when we start teaching them that culture, it brings in that pride. And I'll say that it brings in the pride after we work through all the bad stuff. And even with the parents, we only touch the surface of all the traumas that they've been through with our parenting course. But once we get past that, Once we get to a good point, then we start talking about the good stuff. Then the culture kicks in. Then the pride comes in. Then we start talking to our parents of what more can we do? And the parents start asking, well, what can we do for our children? Okay, talk to them more. Teach them things. Show them a YouTube video. You let them be on phones all the time. Show them a YouTube video. Get them more motivated. Give them things like this, like necklaces. Give them T-shirts. Something that sets them apart, that identifies them as Native. Let them be proud to be Native, because here in this area, I mean, gosh, like natives, I mean, even myself, for all the things that we've done, I still feel less than. You know, so if I feel this way, and I think I'm fairly level-headed, then I'm pretty sure everyone else feels the same way too. You know, so to give these parents something to feel good about, something to have a sense of pride about is a big thing. That culture piece is the thing, because we teach them a song, then they go around humming it, or the kids come back or they're singing it. Teach them how to bead, teach them a little bit of history about themselves, talk to them about politics, of why we are where we are today. So that culture piece, as I said, it's half their life. If we're expecting to get these families better, we can't leave that half out at all.
Culture is at the basis of the Indian Child Welfare Act. While the federal and Nebraska ICWAs do not require the development of cultural plans when Indian children are not placed with a Native relative or other member of their tribe, Nebraska DHHS policy has required these plans for many years. Part of active efforts in Nebraska is to serve the best interest of an Indian child in maintaining the political, cultural, and social connections for the child with their tribe and tribal community.
Up in the morning sky, there I will be, soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me, down the road, hand in hand, you and me. Hey oh, hey oh, hey oh. Hello, hey.
So when we have a youth who's placed in an out-of-home placement that is with someone who is anyone other than a member of the child's tribe, policy says that we should be developing a cultural plan. And the people that should be consulted in this is really the foster parent, the tribe, any appropriate biological family that is able to participate, to really talk about how the child's going to stay connected politically, culturally, and socially with the tribe.
While the state statute and the federal statute don't require a cultural plan when a child is placed in a home that's not a member of their tribe, the state of Nebraska has actually had that in policy for many, many years, and it has been ahead of the game in that regard. Being able to effectively put one of those together has been a bit challenging for workers in the field. And so we do encourage them to first talk with the parents, talk with the kids. What are the kinds of things that they're already doing and learning and want to continue? But then also talk with grandma and aunties and anybody else within the extended family that you can identify to gather that information about what should be included. And as Misty said, it changes over time depending on the child's age. And policy now for DHHS is that they should be updating cultural plans if needed every 6 months, the same as their case plans. I will also mention that DHHS policy does not require a cultural plan in every single ICWA case. And the reason that is because if the child is placed with an extended relative who is a member of their tribe or any other member of this child's tribe, it can be very offensive for us to come in and tell them they have to have a cultural plan.
Yeah, and I would recommend having a cultural plan if they are from different tribes. Because every tribe is so different, and how are we going to help develop that cultural identity, which includes their tribal identity, and knowing those connections and knowing that those clan responsibilities if they're not from that same tribe. So, I mean, it's something that I would recommend, and just to have the family think about how are they going to help the kids develop that cultural identity.
When a cultural plan is required, it should include strategies to promote connectedness to the child's family and tribal customs and culture. Strategies can include, but are not limited to, visits with extended family members, visits to the child's tribal community, attendance at tribal events, celebrations, ceremonies, opportunities for the child to learn tribal history, tribal youth and sports activities, tribal summer camps and internship opportunities, access to tribal language, a way for the child to learn kinship and clan relationships, access to culturally responsive counseling and therapy services if available.
Again, best practice is to involve the child's voice, the parent's voice, connecting with the tribe and making sure that we include their recommendations in that plan as well. And then the person that's ultimately going to be responsible to follow through with that plan, which would be that out-of-home placement provider.
Soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me down the road, hand in hand, you and me. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh.
Well, for the Native children that are more connected with the culture, it's going to be important. It's going to be very, very important to their well-being, mentally, emotionally. They're going to feel connected to their families, their culture. For those that may not, but they know they're enrolled or they know they're part of a tribe, it will support their understanding of who they are. It'll help them to form that identity. This is who I am. And because Native, we're such a small population that we're kind of scattered when you go to any like metropolitan area, unless you're on a reservation. If you go to any, like here in Omaha, the classrooms, we just had a retreat for some Native girls that I worked with. I did a talking circle, and there's about 18 of them, and I asked them, how many other Natives are in your classes that you see? And they all said 1, 2, some said 0. So a lot of times they are the only Native kid in that entire classroom. And in the entire school, there may be a couple, but they may not know each other. So it's just, it's vital, I think. It's more important than people realize, having that cultural plan so that they can fall back on that, they can connect with that.
While a cultural plan is not required by statute, it is important to remember that the provision of culturally relevant services and resources is a requirement of the active efforts provision of the NICWA.
You know, we could be way more sensitive in thinking what's actually culturally relevant to this family. And I think one of the big pieces that's missed in active efforts when we look at the letter of the law is the involvement of extended family. And that's not always just like placement, but it's consultation with family members. It's asking for traditions and history and experiences that we should be providing